Hey guys, so I was thinking about the best way to present this information to you all, and I settled on a PowerPoint with a voiceover. Nothing too crazy, but you could watch it on double speed, and we'll be done in double the time with something to talk about for the discussion board. So here we go. Let's get into it. Kane chapter 6 was all about reading and vocabulary. It's no surprise that the single most effective way to increase a student's vocabulary is by reading. So often, ELA teachers especially will use these one-off vocab sheets where a word is presented almost out of context, definitely not using what Kane refers to as an authentic context. And these words are just there, and students are expected to memorize them without having any sort of real connection to them. That is definitely not an effective way to understand and eventually work this vocabulary into their own language. Kane also includes some techniques for expanding a student's vocab that includes introducing them to etymology, the origin and the history behind the words, teaching students to use context clues through modeling. So we're reading a story together as a class, and a word comes up that not everyone might be familiar with. Let's take the time to see how we can understand its meaning. And then, of course, encourage the use of reference materials, whether it's looking up a word on their phone or using a dictionary. Figuring out how to understand what the word means is a big part of the challenge. Another idea that Kane mentions in this chapter is content-specific vocabulary. And of course, with graphic novels, a specific art form, there is plenty of that to be discussed with the class. Here we have a diagram of a comic or a graphic novel. And as you can see, the panel, gutter, spatial, sequential are all words that are used to describe certain aspects of the art form. A student will be able to utilize these words differently than how they might have previously understood that word, right? Like, it's not a gutter on the side of your house, or you're not in the gutter, but there's a space between the panels in the comics that we're talking about here that adds a sense of meaning to the story. It's also important, Kane says, to have students discuss vocabulary, discuss the word choice of published writers, and encourage students to use words that they might not have a close understanding of yet, but they'll get there. I was in a class doing observations where the teacher, they were doing SAT vocab, and she told them, don't use the words if you don't understand them. And to me, that just defeats the entire purpose of even learning the words in the first place. They should be able to use these words, even if they trip up a few times in utilizing them properly. Now, Persepolis offers us plenty of vocabulary that is unique to the story. For instance, the idea of revolution and social class are two terms that the images help reinforce. For people learning the language, or for students who struggle with reading, those images can go a long way in fortifying their understanding of this terminology. To underscore that point, in this slide here, we have the Islamic Revolution happening, and protesters have their fists clenched and raised towards the sky, which indicates that revolution. Also on this slide, we have the use of the word imperialist, which means a very specific thing. It's a very specific type of diplomacy, if you could even call it that. But we become familiar with one culture's understanding of that word as opposed to another culture's. And the dichotomy that the book creates certainly allows for a student to develop a deeper understanding of what words mean to different cultures. Now, there's no denying the power of reading, but the question will always be, how do we get students to be interested in reading? And Kane cites the importance of teacher-recommended and self-selected reading. It's important to introduce students to a wide range of genres. That's why the graphic novel Persepolis or other graphic novels are so important. And encourage their in-class recommendations for others, which I think could go a long way towards facilitating a discussion of literature in the classroom that goes beyond what's forced, right? It's like, oh, hey, Tommy read this book and maybe Samantha will like it too. It would be really useful if we could get more of those discussions going in the classroom. So I had a couple activity ideas based off of the Kane reading and based off of the graphic novel that I think might be cool to throw around, just put out there. So the first here is using the vocabulary notebook to compile some words that frequently are recurring in the novel. Revolution, social class, ideas of gender, and have the students create a brief graphic novel of their own. And then the next idea I had was a Family Feud style activity where students associate words or phrases with a particular frame, and like they could vote and have, whichever one gets the most amount of votes, that word is most closely associated with that image. And I think that could be a cool way to enhance a student's understanding of the vocabulary that they see throughout the graphic novel. All right, guys, so I have a couple discussion questions that we could use to prompt our blog posts this week, and I'll leave them up here for you. You guys could pause right here and get into it. Enjoy. Thanks for listening.